Welcome back to Tyler Medeiros TV, where we dive deep into the darkest corners of history. Today, we're unraveling one of New Orleans' most chilling unsolved mysteries, the story of the Axeman of New Orleans. Now, if you enjoy videos like this, make sure you go ahead and subscribe for more. Between May 1918 and October 1919, the city of New Orleans was terrorized by a series of brutal attacks that would become known as the Axeman murders. This unidentified killer, who became infamous for his gruesome choice of weapon, left the city in a state of fear and uncertainty. The Axeman's method was chillingly methodical. He would break into homes, often through a door or window, and attack his victims with an axe, typically one he found at the scene. The victims were usually Italian immigrants, and the attacks were marked by their brutality and randomness. The killer seemed to target specific neighborhoods, but otherwise, the attacks appeared almost random. Among his known victims were Joseph and Catherine Maggio, who were found brutally murdered in their home in May of 1918. The crime scene was horrific. The couple was attacked with a hatchet, and the killer even tried to cover his tracks by cleaning up the blood. But it was the next attack on the Morello family that would make a turning point in the investigation. The Axeman's reign of terror continued for over a year, with the police struggling to find any leads. But then, in March 1919, a cryptic letter appeared in the local newspaper, signed by the Axeman himself. The letter was both chilling and bizarre. In the letter, the Axeman claimed that he would spare anyone who played jazz music in their homes on a specific night. In one communication, the Axeman claimed to be no mortal murderer, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell. And as it became clear that the police had no leads and no prospects of an arrest, there were many in the city who believed him. Then in March 1919, the greatest boogeyman that New Orleans has ever known wrote to the New Orleans Times-Picayune to make this direct threat.
Hell, March 13th, 1919, esteemed mortal. They have never caught me, and they never will. They have never seen me, for I am invisible. Even as the ether that surrounds your earth, I am not a human being, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell. I am what you Orleanians and your foolish police call the Axeman. When I see fit, I shall come and claim other victims. I alone know whom they shall be. I shall leave no clue except my bloody axe, be smeared with blood and brains of he whom I have sent below to keep me company. If you wish, you may tell the police to be careful not to rile me. Of course, I am a reasonable spirit. I take no offense at the way they have conducted their investigations in the past. In fact, they have been so utterly stupid as to not only amuse me, but His Satanic Majesty, Francis Joseph, etc. But tell them to beware. Let them not try to discover what I am, for it were better that way, were never born, than to incur the wrath of the Axeman. I don't think there is any need of such a warning, for I feel sure the police will always dodge me, as they have in the past. They are wise and know how to keep away from all harm. Undoubtedly, you Orleanians think of me as a most horrible murderer, which I am, but I could be much worse if I wanted to. If I wished, I could pay a visit to your city every night. At will, I could slay thousands of your best citizens, for I am in close relationship with the Angel of Death. Now to be exact, at 12:15 on next Tuesday night, I'm going to pass over New Orleans. In my infinite mercy, I'm going to make a little proposition to you people. Here it is. I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared, in whose home a jazz band is in full swing at the time I have just mentioned. If everyone has a jazz band going, well then, so much the better for you people. One thing is certain, and that is that some of your people who do not jazz it on Tuesday night, if there be any, will get the axe. Well, as I am cold and crave the warmth of my native Tartarus, and it is about time I leave your earthy home, I will seize my discourse. Hoping that thou wilt publish this, that it may go well with thee, I have been, am, and will be the worst spirit that ever existed either in fact or realm of fancy, the Axeman.
As the Times-Picayune reported, the citizens of New Orleans did their best to follow the Axeman's instructions to the letter. Restaurants and clubs all over town were jammed with dancers, friends, and neighbors gathered in their homes. By midnight, almost every house in the city was alive with noise, many of them pounding out a new composition by the well-known local composer, Joseph Davila, entitled The Mysterious Axeman's Jazz. But despite this brief piece, the attacks resumed later that same year, claiming at least 4 more lives, one being a grocer named Mike Pepitone. After the last killing, the Axeman seemed to vanish into thin air. The police had no solid leads, and the public were left in a state of confusion and fear. One man who came under suspicion was a local Italian immigrant named Joseph Mumphrey. A year after Pepitone's death in December 1920, his widow was arrested in Los Angeles after shooting a man dead whose name is generally given as Joseph Mumphrey. According to Miss Pepitone, she had recognized Mumphrey as the axe murderer. Mumphrey, a known figure in the community, was linked to several of the victims and had a history of violent outbursts. The New Orleans axe murders remain arguably the most perplexing unsolved murders in US history. Was Mumphrey really the New Orleans murderer? Was the Axeman so interested in Italian shopkeepers? Was there evidence, as the police claimed, that he had struck before in 1911? And why did the murders stop abruptly when they did? Most of these questions, unanswered at the time, remain unanswered today. When an article appeared in a privately published journal devoted to the rise of the earliest Los Angeles mafiosos, a good deal of things were said about the Axeman killings. There had been vague suggestions that the Louisiana Axeman had some sort of link with the mafia. New Orleans was the first city in the United States to have a mafia family of its own, dating all the way back to 1879. And early 20th century mafiosos in both New York and New Orleans used grocery stores as fronts for rackets and extortion. According to newspapers and legal records of the time, the attacks on Italian grocers attributed to the Axeman of New Orleans were actually byproducts of small wars fought between the mafia of the city. It begins on the 12th of March in 1910, when a mafioso named Paul Di Cristina attempted to murder the city's boss Vincenzo Moresi. The attempt was unsuccessful. Moresi survived. Not long after, De Cristina himself was then killed on the 13th of April with a shotgun in a grocery store. The owner of the store and the man who killed him was Pepitone. The De Cristina murder was followed by several others involving Italian grocers. Perhaps in retaliation, on July 13th, 1910, a man demanding money shot Joseph Manzella, who owned a grocery store and salon, resulting in Manzella dying on the spot. Manzella's 17-year-old daughter grabbed her father's gun and fatally shot the gunman, Giuseppe Spinazio. Manzella had received several Black Hand letters prior to his death. And after grocer Joseph Davy was beaten to death and his bride wounded, an investigator was warned to stop looking or face serious harm himself. Attacks on grocers continued with the killing of 52-year-old Anthony Gina on May 8, 1912, and then of Anthony J. Salambra, a 27-year-old grocer who was shot to death, and his wife injured, while they were both asleep in bed in their home on May 16, 1912. Finally, on the 19th of November 1915, Moresi himself was killed, shot down by 3 assassins on the street. The man held by the police as chief suspect in this killing was one Joseph Mumphrey, who had only recently been released from serving a short prison sentence. Writers on the Axeman case have frequently asserted that the Joseph Mumphrey, who was involved in the Mike Pepitone murder, had served several terms in prison, and the times he was free coincided uncannily with the Axeman murders. Evidence certainly suggests that Munfrey was involved in the New Orleans grocery killings of 1910 and 1912. Skeptical researchers attempting to follow up leads have been perplexed to discover no references to any man named Munfrey in Los Angeles newspapers of the time. Munfrey did indeed locate from New Orleans to Los Angeles around 1919, but he was otherwise known as the infamous Frank Doc Munfrey. Because he was a pharmacist by profession, Munfrey led a double life. Munfrey is believed by students of New Orleans folklore and authorities on serial killers to have been the Axeman of New Orleans. To many New Orleans citizens, it appeared to be more than a coincidence that there was a gap in the grisly murders while Munfrey was doing time in prison. Joseph Munfrey was also believed to have been connected to the 1907 La Manna kidnapping, a noted mafia crime. He was arrested for dynamiting the grocery store of Charles Graffagnino in 1908 and was considered an intermediary between Di Giorgio and his extortion victim Joseph Serio. He was given a 20-year sentence and sent to prison 2 years later. While awaiting sentencing, the first in the series of grocer killings began. After his release in 1915, he and Angelo Albano were picked up for questioning by New Orleans police. Peter Pepitone, also recently released from prison, told police that 2 men had tried to break into his house 2 weeks before the Vincenzo Moresi's murder. Munfrey was detained as a dangerous and suspicious character until further investigation. Munfrey was eventually joined in LA by his old associate Albano, who moved west and opened an Italian grocery store. Munfrey and his daughter moved to 1719 East 24th Street and operated a small drugstore in San Bernardino. The Albanos moved to 554 East 36th Street. Reportedly, they had a real estate business together, but Albano didn't like his way of doing business and bought out Munfrey's share. One day in October 1921, Munfrey paid a visit to Albano and he never returned. Albano's wife suspected that Munfrey killed him and told the LAPD. 2 months later, on December 5th, 1921, after getting nowhere with authorities, he arrogantly came to her house to confront her and demand money. When he attempted to put his hands on her, she reached for a gun and shot him in the head, chest, and abdomen. The man, whose name was Leonie J. Munfrey, died instantly. After she killed Munfrey, Miss Albano told authorities that she was previously married to a grocer by the name of Michel Pepitone. She added that Munfrey not only killed her second husband, but her first one as well. One of the murders attributed to the Axeman of New Orleans was a Michel Mike Pepitone, who was killed October 27, 1919. Mike Pepitone was a grocer who was the son of the same Peter Pepitone who was sent to prison for killing Paul de Cristina in 1910. On the 27th, he was seen arguing with 2 men described as Italians. Later that night at about 1:50 a.m., his wife woke to his groans after he was beaten in the head with an 18-inch pipe. His head was beaten beyond recognition and died within hours. Although he was killed with a pipe, this murder has been linked to the other axe murders in the press. When interviewed at the time, Miss Angelo Albano gave the police only vague descriptions of the 2 killers as they left their room at the back of the store. Either she knew more than she was letting on, or she discovered additional information later. Esther Albano pleaded self-defense and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. So there you may have it. The Axeman of New Orleans was not so much a serial killer, but possibly a mafia vendetta. Over a century later, the Axeman of New Orleans remains an unsolved mystery and a chilling reminder of a time when fear gripped the city. His story is a haunting chapter in New Orleans' rich history, blending reality with urban legend. What do you think happened to the Axeman of New Orleans? Was Joseph Munfrey the killer, or was he just a convenient suspect? Share your theories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the world's most intriguing mysteries. Thanks for watching, and remember, stay curious and keep exploring the unknown.